I want to start here. We planned this interview before the mass shooting in Austin over the weekend. Obviously, an incredibly hard moment for the city. This is your backyard too. And so how did this impact you, not just as a candidate, but as a person too?
I mean, it was gut-wrenching to see such violence on our streets. Our city is known for its lively and peaceful nightlife, and to see that turn into death and bloodshed is just hard to shake. And I think people across Austin, across Texas, across this country are really sick and tired of elected officials not addressing this epidemic of gun violence. And so it's partly why I'm running for U.S. Senate, is to try to bring these common sense gun safety measures to our state and to our nation. Universal background checks, red flag laws, closing the gun show loophole, safe storage laws. I think these approaches, which are supported by the vast majority of Texans, they could save lives. And what we saw over the weekend in Austin is just the latest example of elected leaders failing us on this issue.
And to follow up on that, we have heard that before from Democrats, that there's these common sense gun laws that should be pursued. But how do you shift that conversation from the rhetoric into actual action?
Well, we need the people of the state to stand up and demand it from their elected leaders. And I think you're seeing that in this election. You're seeing Texans across the political spectrum standing up to the extremism and the corruption in our government. And both of those things are what's plaguing us on this issue. You have giant gun lobby groups that control a lot of elected officials in this case, in this nation, and in our state's capital, our nation's capital. And so we need for the people of this state to demand better from their elected leaders. We shouldn't be beholden to the gun lobby. We should be working together, bringing Democrats and Republicans together to solve this issue and pass common sense gun safety legislation.
And also this weekend, the U.S. and Israel launched a major military action against Iran that is still ongoing. Can you talk about whether or not you support that action and why or why not?
Well, our Constitution is clear that Congress is supposed to be declaring war. I would like to see our Commander-in-Chief make his case for this kind of military intervention to the people's representatives. I think sunlight is the best disinfectant, and we need more transparency when it comes to these decision-making processes. And right now, we are losing American lives in the Middle East. We saw troops die over the weekend without a clear plan of action, a clear exit strategy from the executive branch. And I think that should be troubling to all of us who lived through the military disasters of the 2000s, like the Iraq War. And many of us are seeing similar parallels to those military adventures that robbed this country of young lives and of our moral standing in the world.
I want to ask you about your campaign, and you've built this in large part around your Christian faith and what you call top versus bottom politics instead of left versus right. Can you talk about how those two ideas connect and why you believe that's the right message for Texas right now?
Well, I think working people in this state, in this country, are tired of being divided. The billionaires who own the algorithms, who own the news networks, who own a lot of the politicians fighting on our screens, they want us at each other's throats. They want us focused on how we're different rather than on how we're the same. And so we are building a movement to bring working people together across all these divisions, partisan divisions, racial and cultural and religious divisions, so that we can focus on what we all have in common, our shared dreams and our shared problems. The fact that those billionaires are closing our schools and gutting our health care and raising taxes on all of us while they cut taxes for themselves. That to me is the real fight in this country, and it's what our campaign is trying to address.
You said that you're building a movement, but Texas has not elected a Democrat statewide in decades. I want to ask, what are you doing differently from past Democratic nominees to try and change that?
Well, I don't think you've seen a movement like this before. You haven't seen a movement that is explicitly trying to bring working people together across partisan divisions. And you're seeing a growing backlash in our state to the extremism and the corruption in our government. I can't tell you how many people come up to me at the end of these events and whisper, "I'm not a Democrat." That is the kind of movement we need if we're going to win this seat in November and if we're going to change the politics in this country.
As for the border, you've said we should treat our border like a front porch with a welcome mat and a lock on the front door. What does that mean, though, in terms of concrete policy terms?
Well, it means having more manpower on our border to be able to detect fentanyl, having more immigration judges so that we can process more of these applications. It's relieving the visa backlog. It's reforming our asylum system. It is creating a pathway to citizenship for our undocumented neighbors who have been here for years, sometimes decades. That's the kind of common sense immigration approach that most Texans want and most Americans want. We need comprehensive immigration reform. We can have border security and welcome people who want to live the American dream. Those are not mutually exclusive goals.
Another issue that a lot of Texans are wondering about is the cost of living. What's one policy that you would support that you think could lower costs right away in your first year in office?
Well, I have many ideas for this. In the state legislature, I passed major legislation to bring down the cost of housing, the cost of childcare, the cost of prescription drugs, and I want to continue that work in our nation's capital. I think we could bring down the cost of childcare by passing universal early childhood education for every single kid in this country. I think we could bring down the cost of healthcare by capping the cost of life-saving medications. And I think we can bring down the cost of housing by supporting more building. We could support more first-time home buyers. These are all things that we could do through federal action. And I think people across this state are hungry for that kind of bold action to address the cost of living crisis.
For the last few weeks, voters have been going to the polls where they have a decision to make between you and your primary opponent, Representative Jasmine Crockett. I've heard you say that you two are on the same team, but what is the clearest difference between you and her that voters should be considering?
Well, I'm the only candidate in this primary that has been in a competitive general election. I have won races like this. I have flipped seats like this. I first got elected to the state house by flipping a Trump district that no one thought was winnable in a county that was so red it hadn't voted for a Democrat for president since Jimmy Carter. And I did that by building a big coalition, a big tent. I inspired Democrats to show up at the polls. I brought in new voters, particularly young voters, and I peeled people off from the middle and from the other side. And you've got to do all three if you're going to win a seat like this in Texas. And I have a track record of doing just that.
And if voters do give you 6 years in the Senate, what is the most important measurable outcome that you want them to judge you on?
Well, I think bringing down costs and I think tackling corruption. Those are the two things I hear most about on the campaign trail. People are worried about this cost of living crisis and they're worried about the corruption crisis. And those two things are related. We have a cost of living crisis because we have a corruption crisis. Our government only works for the ultra wealthy. It doesn't work for the rest of us. And so if we can fix that, if we can get big money out of our politics, if we can eliminate things like gerrymandering and pass term limits, I think that we could finally bring down the cost, not just of groceries, but of housing, of childcare, of prescription drugs, of higher education, all of these rising costs that are locking people out of the American dream.
U.S. Senate candidate James Talarico, thank you for your time.
Thanks for having me.